Zara's shaky hands gripped her ticket while the agent's mocking glare wounded more than any blade. I don't mind who your dad supposedly is. You pair aren't boarding this plane, he snarled audibly for all to catch. The twin sisters shared looks, recognizing precisely what was occurring once more. When Zara at last accessed her mobile, her sibling Nia murmured, "Go ahead." Neither lass could have foreseen that this lone contact wouldn't merely bring them residence. It would halt every aircraft in Mid-Atlantic Airlines group and reveal years of organized bias. Prior to delving into this astonishing tale, inform me from where you're viewing. And if you trust in defending equity, press that thumbs up and join button to remain informed on additional accounts that unveil the reality in our community. 17-year-old twin sisters Zara and Nia Jackson waited calmly in queue at Denver Global Airport, enthusiasm simmering under their poised appearances. As top scholars at Wellington Academy, this university exploration journey to Boston signified more than merely touring prospective schools. For the initial occasion, their guarding dad, Marcus Jackson, had permitted them to journey solo, a mark of his increasing faith in their self-reliance. What the hurried commuters dashing by them couldn't conceivably grasp was that Marcus Jackson wasn't merely any worried guardian. He was the recently named head of Mid-Atlantic Airlines, a role he intentionally concealed to protect his kin from undesired notice and more crucially to permit him to evaluate the firm's ethos without the contrived deference his position would demand. The sisters possessed premium seats, a sensible choice their dad had selected to guarantee they'd be relaxed and properly cared for, not a show of advantage or riches. Clad in cozy sweatshirts, pants, and tidy but worn trainers, they appeared like ordinary youths embarking on a quest, their matching features bordered by orderly twisted locks, eagerness glowing in their deep cocoa gaze. The queue at the Mid-Atlantic registration desk advanced consistently ahead until the sisters arrived at the forefront. The Caucasian clerk, a fellow whose label named him as Trevor Reynolds, gazed right past them to the traveler positioned rearward. Following, he summoned, utterly disregarding the two African-American youths straight before him. A mature Caucasian duo stepped past the sisters, evidently presuming they weren't really in queue, and Trevor promptly started handling their passes with a cordial grin. Going to Chicago now? Splendid town this season. Nia coughed courteously. Pardon me, sir. We were following in queue. Trevor's grin vanished promptly, his gaze constricting as he at last recognized their existence. You'll need to await your chance, he uttered sharply, persisting to type on his console for the duo he was aiding. But we were following, Zara uttered, her tone serene but resolute. We've been positioned here for 15 minutes. Trevor's mouth tensed. I'll attend to you when I'm prepared. The sisters shared stares. This wasn't the initial occasion they'd encountered this specific form of obscurity, but it pained nevertheless. They awaited as Trevor intentionally prolonged his duration with the duo, engaging in casual chat about Chicago sights while casting sporadic stares at the sisters, a faint smirk dancing at the edges of his lips. Following the duo left, 3 additional Caucasian travelers were assisted prior to Trevor at last unwillingly gestured the sisters ahead. Passes and identification, he barked, not establishing visual contact. Zara positioned their premium boarding documents and scholar identifications on the ledge. Trevor's brows elevated as he scrutinized the passes. Premium? Are you certain you're at the correct ledge? His inflection implied, they must have erred. Yes, our dad bought these passes for us, Nia clarified serenely. We're touring schools in Boston. Trevor grasped their boarding documents between his digit and pointer as if they might be tainted. These don't appear correct. Where did you obtain these? His suggestion was evident. He distrusted the passes were fake. Our dad bought them straight from the carrier, Zara uttered, her tolerance starting to erode. Is there an issue? Trevor's mouth compressed into a slim stripe. I'll require to confirm these and I'll require extra identification. Scholar identifications aren't adequate. Rearward them, the queue was expanding lengthier. Folks were commencing to gaze. We're 17. Nia clarified. We don't possess driver's permits yet. Our dad was informed scholar identifications would be adequate for internal journey when he reserved the passes. Trevor exhaled theatrically. Well, somebody informed your dad incorrect. Wait here. He vanished into a rear workspace with their passes and identifications. The sisters positioned awkwardly at the ledge for almost 15 minutes while fellow clerks persisted to assist travelers who had reached following them. They could perceive sporadic amusement from the workspace where Trevor had vanished. At last, he returned. Smacking down 2 boarding documents and their identifications. There was a mistake in the setup. He proclaimed audibly enough for nearby travelers to perceive. You've been relocated to coach boarding entrance 32. Zara scrutinized the boarding documents, her forehead creasing. But these aren't the places Father reserved. We're meant to be in premium. Trevor inclined a head, softening his tone. Here, I don't grasp what sort of fraud you pair are attempting to execute, but specific folks require to comprehend that premium isn't for all. You ought to be thankful you're boarding the aircraft at all. His stress on specific folks rendered his intent unmistakable. Nia, invariably swifter to fury than her sibling, parted her mouth to reply, but Zara positioned a cautionary palm on her limb. They'd been instructed that righteous fury from youthful African-American females was too frequently utilized against them. Our dad, particularly reserved premium passes, Zara persisted, maintaining her tone firm. I'd desire to converse with a manager, please. Trevor's countenance solidified. Managers occupied. If you possess an issue with your places, you can raise it at the entrance. Following. He gestured impatiently to the folks rearward them. Degraded and furious, the sisters gathered their modified boarding documents and shifted away from the ledge. We ought to contact Dad, Nia murmured. No, Zara responded, though it required all her resolve not to grasp for her mobile. He possesses that major council gathering today, recall. He particularly requested us not to contact unless it was a crisis. This seems like a crisis to me, Nia grumbled. But she grasped her sibling was correct. Their dad had labored incredibly diligently to attain his role, and they didn't desire to disrupt him over something they could manage themselves. We'll resolve it at the entrance, Zara guaranteed her, though uncertainty crept into her tone. Let's merely pass security initially. Neither lass observed Trevor observing them with a smug grin as they proceeded away. Nor did they observe him grasp a device and execute a swift contact. Yeah, it's Trevor. 2 African-American youths, twin sisters, attempting to execute a quick one with premium passes. I demote them back to coach, but you might desire to watch out. Something doesn't seem correct about them. He disconnected, content that he'd performed his part to preserve what he deemed the appropriate order of matters. The security station loomed forward, a constriction of humanity shuffling through the TSA's elaborate examination process. The sisters joined the queue, still debating how they would manage the pass matter at the entrance when they observed a design forming. Caucasian traveler after Caucasian traveler passed through the standard examination with minimal bother, barely interrupting pace as they gathered their items on the other side. Then arrived their chance. Randomly chosen for extra examination, proclaimed TSA clerk Vanessa Miller with a smirk that implied there was nothing random about it, the sisters were guided to a separate path where they would be exposed to enhanced security steps. Is this truly required? Zara queried courteously. We possess a journey to capture and we're already lagging timetable. Vanessa's appearance solidified. Are you doubting security procedures? Because I can render this a lot more challenging if you'd favor. Her palm lingered meaningfully over her communicator, a evident menace that she could intensify the matter at any instant. No, ma'am, Nia responded swiftly, casting her sibling a cautionary stare. We comprehend. Vanessa gestured for them to position their luggage on a separate desk. All out of the sacks. All. The sisters obeyed, cautiously extracting their neatly stowed items. Zara flinched as Vanessa roughly extracted her portable computer, scraping it against the desk's rim. Cautious, please. That possesses all my academic work on it, she uttered before she could halt herself. Vanessa's gaze constricted. If you're worried about your possessions, perhaps you shouldn't be journeying. I can refuse you passage right now if you persist to meddle with security processes. Her tone carried, attracting notice from nearby commuters. Nia positioned a soothing palm on her sibling's limb as Vanessa persisted her inspection, intentionally rough as she rummaged through their carefully folded garments, perusing private notes in their diaries, and even unsealing a sealed packet containing Zara's remedy, spilling capsules across the desk. "What are these?" she required, as if she'd uncovered illicit substances instead of prescribed sensitivity remedy. "Fexofenadine," Zara clarified. "For my sensitivities. The prescription data is right there on the container." Vanessa disregarded her clarification, positioning the remedy aside for further inspection before proceeding to their personal items. While this was occurring, another clerk neared. "Arms out, feet apart," the second clerk directed. "We require to execute a pat-down." The pat-down was nothing short of degrading. The clerk's palms were rough, intrusive, lingering in ways that rendered both lasses intensely uneasy. Nearby, Vanessa executed loud remarks about their locks. "Invariably have to examine these elaborate hairdos," she proclaimed to no one in particular. "You wouldn't trust what folks attempt to conceal in there." Several other TSA clerks chuckled as if sharing an internal quip. A Caucasian lady in queue observed what was occurring and commenced capturing with her mobile. Almost promptly, a TSA manager appeared beside her. "Ma'am, capturing security processes is forbidden. Erase that footage promptly." "This is incorrect," the lady protested. "Those lasses aren't performing anything to warrant this handling. Erase the footage or I'll be compelled to hold you for questioning," the manager menaced. "Your selection." Unwillingly, the lady obeyed, casting an regretful stare toward the sisters as she stored her mobile. By the time the enhanced examination was complete, nearly 45 minutes had elapsed. The sisters' items had been carelessly restored. Zara's portable computer was evidently scraped, and they were now perilously close to missing their journey. "Possess a pleasant journey," Vanessa uttered with mock sweetness as they gathered their disordered possessions. "Superior hasten. I perceive they're strict about boarding durations at entrance 32. As they hastened away, Nia extracted her mobile. "We require to contact Dad now." Zara verified the time and wagged her head. "He's in that sealed session with the council right now." His aide uttered he couldn't be disrupted for any cause. "We'll manage this ourselves and inform him all when he contacts to verify on us tonight." Shaken but resolute, they hastened toward their entrance, unaware that their trial was merely commencing. Have you ever encountered bias while journeying? Comment numeral 1 if you faced unjust handling at security stations like Zara and Nia. Or comment numeral 2 if you've observed it occurring to one else. Don't overlook to press this video if you trust all deserves to be handled with honor and join to perceive more tales of valor in the face of unfairness. What do you believe is awaiting for these valiant young females at the eatery? Will anyone defend them? Or are they utterly solitary in their battle against bias? With their boarding duration still an hour distant, the sisters resolved to halt at Sky High Eatery, an airport dining spot promoting swift assistance and superior cuisine. Their prior enthusiasm about the journey had vanished, replaced by a nagging worry, and more promptly, famine. The dining spot was occupied but not crammed with several vacant desks evidently visible from the doorway. The receptionist, a fair-haired lady whose label read Melissa Carter, gazed up from her mobile as they neared. Her grin faded the instant she observed them. "How many?" she queried, her inflection noticeably colder than it had been for the Caucasian kin she just positioned. "2, please," Zara responded. Melissa executed a display of verifying her device. "There's going to be about a 45-minute await for a desk," she proclaimed, not troubling to gaze up. Nia stared pointedly at the vacant desks evidently visible throughout the dining spot. "But there are at least 5 vacant desks right there," she uttered, maintaining her tone courteous but resolute. Melissa's mouth thinned. Those are set aside, she responded sharply. The sisters shared knowing stares. This wasn't their initial meeting with the set-aside desk justification. Your site utters you don't accept set-asides, Zara indicated, extracting the dining spots page on her mobile as proof. It utters right here. Sky High Eatery does not accept set-asides. Positioning is initial arrive, initial assisted. Melissa's countenance flushed. Well, the site is obsolete. We do accept set-asides now, and all those desks are claimed for. As if on signal, a Caucasian duo entered behind the sisters. Without even recognizing the sisters' ongoing dialogue, Melissa brightened promptly. 2. Write this path, please. She seized 2 lists and guided the duo to one of the allegedly set-aside desks. Nia sensed her fury rising. Pardon me, she summoned after Melissa. We were here initial and you just informed us there were no desks available. Melissa pivoted, her appearance solidifying. Is there an issue? Yes, there's an issue, Nia responded. Her tolerance eroding thin. You just informed us all the desks were set aside, then promptly positioned folks who entered after us. Before Melissa could reply, a fellow in a fastened shirt and neckwear neared. His label named him as Keith Dawson, overseer. Is all right here, Melissa? He queried, though his stare was fixed suspiciously on the sisters. These lasses are causing a disturbance, Melissa uttered swiftly. I clarified that we possess an awaiting roster, but they're requiring prompt positioning. That's not what occurred, Zara cut in. Your receptionist informed us there's a 45-minute await, but there are vacant desks, and she just positioned folks who entered after us. Keith's appearance didn't alter. He hadn't taken his gaze off the sisters since he'd reached, hadn't even stared at the vacant desks or the newly positioned duo. I comprehend you're distressed, but I'm going to need to request you to soften your tones. We possess patrons attempting to relish their meals. His inflection implied they were hollering, though both lasses had been uttering serenely. We're not being boisterous, Nia objected. We merely desire to be handled justly. If you persist to create a spectacle, I'll be compelled to summon guards, Keith menaced, folding his limbs across his torso. Airport rules permit us to deny assistance to disturbing persons. From nearby, a Hispanic server observed the engagement with growing worry. She neared cautiously. Keith, I can take them at one of my desks. Number 12 just vacated. Remain out of this, Elena. Keith barked without gazing at her. Go verify on your other desks. Elena Rodriguez wavered, evidently torn between adhering to her overseer's commands and performing what she grasped was correct. With an regretful stare at the sisters, she withdrew, vanishing into the galley. Look, Keith uttered, his tone dropping to a menacing murmur. I recommend you locate somewhere else to consume. We set aside the entitlement to deny assistance to anyone, and right now you're not greeted here. The message was evident. Their type wasn't greeted. It had nothing to do with set-asides or awaiting rosters. Famished, irritated, and increasingly disheartened, the sisters pivoted to depart. As they proceeded away, they perceived Keith praising Melissa. Fine task. Can't permit them believe they can merely enter and obtain whatever they desire. Outside the dining spot, Nia battled back furious droplets. I'm so weary of this every single occasion. Zara positioned her limb around her sibling's shoulders. I grasp, but we can't permit them succeed by shattering us down. We'll seize something from a dispensing device and then resolve this pass matter. As they commenced to proceed away, a tone summoned out behind them. Await. Elena Rodriguez hastened toward them, staring anxiously over her shoulder to guarantee Keith wasn't observing. She pressed 2 coupons into Zara's palm for the cuisine area. It's not much, but she wavered, then extracted her mobile. Look, I observed what occurred in there. It occurs all the time. Keith and Melissa perform this to African American patrons constantly. If you're going to submit a grievance, I'll be a observer. Here's my digit. She swiftly typed her contact data into Zara's mobile. I have to return before they observe I'm absent. But please don't permit them escape with this. With another anxious stare toward the dining spot, Elena hastened back inside. The sisters positioned there momentarily astonished by this unforeseen act of partnership. It was a tiny benevolence, but in that instant, it signified all. Perhaps we're not utterly solitary after all, Nia uttered mildly, some of her prior vigor returning. Equipped with the cuisine coupons and a renewed sense of resolve, they headed for the cuisine area, unaware that the worst of their trial was yet to arrive. By the time Zara and Nia neared entrance 32, they had succeeded to consume a swift meal and regroup sentimentally. Verifying the time, they observed that privileged boarding for premium patrons had already commenced. Following their encounter at registration, they had visited a patron assistance desk where a harassed clerk had unwillingly rectified their boarding passes back to premium. Following confirming their pass data, she had provided no clarification or regret for the mistake, merely handing over the fresh boarding passes with barely concealed impatience. Now with appropriate boarding passes in palm, they neared the entrance with cautious hopefulness. Perhaps the worst was rearward them. They couldn't have been more incorrect. The entrance clerk, a mature Caucasian fellow whose label named him as Richard Whitman, was guiding premium patrons through the boarding path when the sisters presented their passes. His greeting grin vanished promptly as he scrutinized their passes. There appears to be an issue here, he uttered. His tone audible enough to attract notice from nearby travelers. Please step aside while I confirm these boarding passes. Nia's tolerance had eroded perilously thin. What issue? We've already had our places altered once today without clarification. The patron assistance desk just rectified them. What feasible matter could there be now? Richard's gaze constricted. I'm going to require to view some identification, he required, disregarding her inquiry entirely. And please maintain your tone down. The sisters produced their scholar identifications once more. Richard inspected them with exaggerated scrutiny, pivoting them over repeatedly, holding them up to the illumination as if verifying for marks, all while persisting to process other premium travelers with barely a stare at their papers. These don't appear authentic, he at last proclaimed. Scholar identifications can be easily fabricated. They're official identifications from Wellington Preparatory Academy, Zara clarified, struggling to preserve her composure. They possess the Academy seal, our images, all. The carrier confirmed they were adequate identification for internal journey when our dad reserved the passes. Richard's reply was to grasp for the announcement setup microphone. Guards to entrance 32, please. Guards to entrance 32. The proclamation resounded through the station, causing nearby travelers to gaze and murmur. Several extracted mobiles and commenced capturing the confrontation. This is bias, Nia uttered resolutely. No longer ready to feign this was all merely a sequence of regrettable miscommunications. We possess authentic passes and identification. You're delaying us because we're African American. That's unlawful. Richard's countenance flushed scarlet. That's a grave charge, young lady. I could have you extracted from this airport for issuing false assertions against carrier personnel. I'm merely adhering to guards' procedures. Which procedures precisely require you to proclaim a guard's requirement when there isn't one? Zara challenged. Or to scrutinize our academy identifications while barely staring at other travelers' identification. Before Richard could reply, a fresh tone entered the dialogue. What appears to be the issue here, Richard? The lady who neared was perhaps in her 50s with dark complexion and her locks drawn back in a tight knot. Her label named her as Diane Blackett Manager. The sisters sensed a surge of optimism. Surely another African-American lady would comprehend what was occurring and intercede on their behalf. These two are attempting to board with premium passes that appear to be fake, Richard clarified, his inflection implying he was dealing with hardened offenders rather than youthful lasses. And they're issuing charges of bias to attempt to daunt me into permitting them board. Diane grinned tightly at the sisters. Permit me view what's occurring here. She scrutinized their boarding passes and identifications, then gestured for them to step aside with her, away from the queue and the curious observers. "Richard, persist boarding. I'll manage this." For an instant, solitary with Diane, the sisters permitted themselves to optimism. "Thank you," Nia commenced. "We've been dealing with this sort of handling since we reached at the airport and were merely attempting to reach Boston to tour schools." Diane's cordial demeanor altered the instant they were out of hearing of the other travelers. Her tone dropped to a harsh murmur. "Hear to me cautiously. I don't grasp what game you pair believe you're executing, but you require to comprehend how matters function. Folks like us require to grasp how to act if we desire to be handled equally." The disloyalty struck like a bodily strike. "Folks like us," Zara reiterated skeptically. "What's that meant to signify?" "It signifies," Diane proceeded, her tone still soft, "that creating a spectacle and hurling around charges of bias isn't going to obtain you what you desire. It merely affirms what they already believe about us. You require to be twice as courteous, twice as tolerant, twice as flawless. That's the reality." "But we haven't performed anything incorrect," Nia protested. "We've been courteous and tolerant while being biased against at every pivot." Diane's appearance solidified further. "Do you believe I attained to be a manager by summoning out every slight aggression? By creating a spectacle every occasion someone made presumptions about me? This is the actual world, not some societal equity online thread." She gazed down at their boarding passes once more. "I'm going to permit you board, but deem this a caution. I don't desire to perceive about you causing trouble on my carriers. You comprehend me?" Without awaiting for a reply, she guided them back to the entrance where Richard was observing with undisguised displeasure. "Their papers verifies out," Diane notified him coldly. "They can board." Richard's mouth compressed into a slim stripe, but he unwillingly stepped aside. As the sisters shifted toward the jet path, Diane's phrases resounded in their intellects. The disloyalty from one who ought to have been a partner pained perhaps more profoundly than the original bias. They boarded in quiet, both wrestling with the implications of Diane's caution and the fatiguing reality it embodied. What they didn't grasp was that their trial was far from concluded. At the conclusion of the jet path, one ultimate sentinel awaited. The sisters had barely taken 2 paces onto the jet path when they encountered yet another hindrance. A tall, wide-shouldered fellow in a Mid-Atlantic Airlines garb positioned blocking their route, scrutinizing boarding passes with brief stares before gesturing travelers through. His label read Gregory Walsh. When Zara and Nia presented their passes, his demeanor promptly altered. "I'm going to require you pair to step aside," he uttered, making no effort to soften his tone. "There appears to be an issue with your passes." Travelers rearward them were compelled to navigate around the impromptu station Gregory had formed. "What issue?" Zara queried, fatigue evident in her tone. "We've already had our passes confirmed multiple occasions." Gregory's appearance stayed impassive. "I've obtained a setup alert indicating suspicious activity linked with your reservation. I require to execute some extra verifications before I can permit you to board." "What sort of suspicious activity?" Nia required. "Were Academy scholars going to tour schools? What could conceivably be suspicious about that?" Gregory disregarded her inquiry entirely. "Please step aside and await while I persist boarding." Other travelers, with no selection but to obey or risk further intensification, the sisters shifted to the side of the jet path. They observed as traveler after traveler was gestured through with barely a stare at their papers. Minutes extended into a quarter hour, then half an hour. The once occupied flow of boarding travelers dwindled to a trickle, then halted altogether. Throughout this duration, Gregory executed several contacts on his communicator, uttering too quietly for them to perceive, sporadically staring in their direction with what appeared suspiciously like contentment. At last, as the final travelers vanished into the aircraft, Gregory neared them. "I'm afraid there's been a development," he proclaimed, not troubling to conceal his smirk. "The journey is now utterly full and over-reserved. Your places have been relocated to travelers in good standing. That's unfeasible, Zara protested. We possess confirmed premium passes. You can't merely give our places away. I'm afraid I can, Gregory countered. Carrier guideline permits for traveler relocation in cases of guards' worries or over-reserving. In this case, both conditions apply. What guards' worries? Nia queried, her tone rising in irritation. We've performed nothing incorrect. We've collaborated with every unreasonable requirement since we reached at this airport. This is blatant bias. At the term bias, Gregory's countenance solidified. He grasped for his communicator. Guards to Jet Path 32. Traveler matter. Within minutes, 2 guards appeared. Their labels named them as Tom Bennett and Frank Miller. Both fellows neared with palms resting near their arms, as if the 2 youthful lasses embodied some sort of menace. What appears to be the issue here? Tom queried, addressing Gregory rather than the sisters. These 2 are refusing to accept that they've been denied boarding, Gregory clarified, painting an utterly false picture of the matter. They're becoming aggressive and issuing charges against carrier personnel. We are not being aggressive, Zara persisted, struggling to maintain her tone serene. We're merely attempting to comprehend why our confirmed places were given away after we were intentionally delayed here. Frank, the larger of the 2 guards, stepped forward. The computer randomly selects travelers for denial of boarding when journeys are over-reserved. Nothing personal. The smirk that accompanied this evident falsehood rendered it clear that there was nothing random about it. Nia, pushed beyond endurance, extracted her mobile. I'm capturing this. We've been organizedly biased against from the instant we entered this airport, and we possess proof of it. Tom's palm shot out toward her mobile. Capturing guards' processes is forbidden in the airport. I'll require to seize that gadget. This isn't a guard's process, Zara protested. You're attempting to conceal bias by citing fake guards' worries. That's a grave charge, Frank uttered, his tone dropping to a menacing level. One that could result in both of you being held for questioning. Is that what you desire? The implied menace hung in the atmosphere. Holding would signify missing any chance of reaching Boston today. Their dad's careful scheming, their school visits, all would be disrupted. Worst of all, they'd be utterly at the mercy of a setup that had already demonstrated itself biased against them at every pivot. Fine, Zara at last uttered, positioning a restraining palm on her sibling's limb. We'll depart, but this isn't concluded. It is for today, Gregory responded with undisguised contentment. Your places are gone, the journey is boarding, and you pair aren't boarding it. I recommend you locate another path to Boston or just go residence. Under the watchful gazes of the guards, the sisters were led away from the entrance as the ultimate boarding summon for their journey was proclaimed over the announcement setup. They proceeded in quiet, the burden of defeat pressing down on them. Every pace they'd taken through this airport had been met with opposition, bias, and blockage. They'd been tolerant. They'd been courteous. They'd adhered to the guidelines. And still, they'd been denied the basic honor and assistance that every other traveler appeared to obtain without inquiry. As the noises of their journey readying for departure reached them, Nia pivoted to her sibling, droplets of irritation welling in her gaze. We have to contact Dad now. This occasion, Zara didn't debate. Have you ever attained your breaking point when confronting unfairness? Comment numeral 1 if you trust there arrives a time when remaining quiet is no longer a choice. Or comment numeral 2 if you believe the sisters ought to have kept attempting to labor within the setup. If you're outraged by what these young females have endured, press that thumbs up button to display your backing for defending against bias. And don't overlook to join for more tales that unveil the harsh realities many confront every day. What do you believe will occur when their dad learns how his daughters have been handled? Will he trust them, or will he become yet another letdown in their battle for equity? Positioned on a seat in a serene angle of the station, far from entrance 32 in the journey that ought to have carried them to Boston, Zara at last extracted her mobile. Her palm trembled mildly as she navigated to her dad's contact. "He's going to be in that council gathering," Nia reminded her, though her inflection implied she no longer concerned about the disruption. "I grasp," Zara responded, "but this has gone far past what we can manage ourselves." She pressed the contact button and positioned the mobile on amplifier. To their astonishment, Marcus Jackson answered almost promptly. "Zara, all okay, dear?" His deep tone, usually so comforting, now caused both lasses to battle back droplets. "Dad," Zara commenced, struggling to maintain her tone firm. "We couldn't board the journey. They wouldn't permit us board." There was an instant of quiet before Marcus replied, his inflection cautious, measured. "Inform me precisely what occurred from the commencement." For the following several minutes, the sisters took turns detailing their encounter. The registration meeting with Trevor Reynolds, the TSA examination with Vanessa Miller, the dining spot incident with Melissa Carter and Keith Dawson, the entrance confrontation with Richard Whitman and Diane Blackett, and at last, the jet path denial from Gregory Walsh. Throughout their account, Marcus stayed quiet, though they could perceive his managed respiration growing more deliberate as the tale developed. When they noted how their premium places had been revoked, then restored, only to be taken away once more at the final instant, they perceived what sounded like a writing tool snapping in the backdrop. "Dad," Nia ventured when they'd concluded. "Are you still there?" "I'm here," Marcus responded, his tone unnaturally serene. "Did you obtain the titles of all implicated?" "Yes," Zara verified. "We noted down titles and label numbers whenever we could." "Good," Marcus uttered. "Very good. Then, following a brief halt, girls, there's something I require to inform you. Something I probably ought to have informed you before you departed." The sisters swapped puzzled stares. "What is it, Dad?" Marcus inhaled deeply. "Because I was so persistent about you journeying mid-Atlantic, because I obtained you premium passes, it's because I'm the fresh head executive of Mid-Atlantic Airlines." Stunned quiet filled the atmosphere between them. "You're what?" Nia at last managed. "I was named 6 weeks prior," Marcus clarified. "The council brought me in to transform the enterprise around following their prior management matters. But I desired to evaluate the carrier's ethos authentically without my role influencing how personnel acted. That's why I maintained it quiet. Why I employed my private profile to reserve your passes instead of employing the management journey setup." "Oh wait," Zara cut in. "So the entire duration we were being handled like this? You were the head executive's daughters?" Marcus concluded, his tone tight with managed fury. "Being biased against by folks who had no notion who you were or who they were really dealing with. What are we meant to perform now?" Nia queried. "Our journey's gone, and even if we could obtain another one." "Don't shift," Marcus directed. "Remain precisely where you are. I'm enacting Crisis Procedure Alpha right now. You'll view what that signifies quite shortly, and maintain your mobile on. Capture all that occurs from this point ahead." The line went quiet for an instant as they perceived their dad issuing swift commands to one else in the space with him. When he returned to the contact, his tone had a steel rim they'd rarely perceived before. "In about 2 minutes, you're going to commence obtaining contacts from carrier leaders. They're going to provide you all under the sun. Private aircraft, helicopter shifts, opulent lodgings. Don't accept anything. Inform them you're awaiting for my direct directions only. Comprehend?" "Yes," the sisters responded in unison, still attempting to process this astonishing unveiling. "Good. Remain strong. I'll be in constant contact, and this will all be concluded soon. I adore you both." The contact concluded, leaving the sisters gazing at each other in skepticism. True to their dad's forecast, Zara's mobile rang barely a minute subsequently. The caller identification displayed Mid-Atlantic Airlines management workspace. Before she could reply, Nia's mobile also commenced ringing with a similar caller identification. As forecasted, the tones on the other end were panicked carrier leaders providing prompt aid, private conveyance, anything and all to amend for the regrettable miscommunication, adhering to their dad's directions. The sisters courteously but resolutely declined all provides, uttering they were awaiting direct directions from Marcus Jackson only. Just as they concluded these contacts, a familiar shape came hastening toward them. Richard Whitman, the entrance clerk who had blocked their boarding merely 30 minutes prior, was nearing with an utterly distinct demeanor. His prior disdain had been replaced by subservient alarm. "M. Jackson, Ms. Jackson," he summoned out mildly out of respiration from rushing. "There's been a terrible miscommunication. We've arranged for a private corporate aircraft to take you to Boston promptly. If you'll merely accompany me." "No thank you, Mr. Whitman," Zara responded coolly. "We're awaiting for direct directions from our dad." Richard's countenance contorted with barely concealed fury. The note of their dad evidently triggered something in him, but he struggled to preserve a veneer of expertise. "I comprehend your distress, but issuing false assertions about your kin links isn't going to aid the matter." His inflection shifted, becoming menacing once more now that they were solitary, away from the observers at the entrance. In reality, issuing false utterances about carrier personnel could result in you being positioned on a no-journey roster. "Perhaps we ought to debate this somewhere more private." "Is that a menace, Mr. Whitman?" Nia queried, extracting her mobile and commencing to capture. Richard's gaze widened as he observed the active capture. From the mobile amplifier, Marcus Jackson's tone suddenly emerged as he had never disconnected and had been heeding to the entire exchange. "Mr. Whitman, this is Marcus Jackson, Chief Head Officer of Mid-Atlantic Airlines and dad of the young females you've been biasing against. All you utter is being captured and monitored. I recommend you return to your entrance and await further directions from carrier oversight." The hue depleted from Richard's countenance as the full implications of the matter crashed down upon him. Without another term, he pivoted and fled back toward entrance 32, nearly colliding with a drink trolley in his haste. The sisters gazed at each other, a blend of vindication and skepticism washing over them. "Dad," Zara uttered into the mobile. "What's Crisis Procedure Alpha?" Marcus' tone was grim but content. "Observe the departure panels. You're about to uncover." The departure panels flickered throughout the station, attracting confused stares from commuters. Then, like tiles tumbling, journey after journey commenced displaying the identical status update. Delayed entrance return. The proclamations commenced moments subsequently, resounding through the station. "Attention Mid-Atlantic Airlines travelers. Due to an head-ordered safety procedure confirmation, all Mid-Atlantic journeys currently on the runway or at entrances are being held. Travelers already boarded are requested to remain positioned. We regret for the inconvenience and will provide updates as they become available." All around them, bewilderment spread through the station as commuters referred their mobiles, verified the panels, and neared harassed-appearing entrance clerks for clarifications. The clerks themselves appeared perplexed, verifying their computer stations with increasing alarm as more commands filtered down from above. Through their still open mobile line, the sisters could perceive their dad issuing swift-fire directives to what sounded like a crisis oversight group. "I desire every journey halted, every single one. I don't mind if they're midway through rolling. Get them back to the entrances. And I desire the Denver facility overseer in my workspace via footage gathering in 5 minutes." "Dad," Nia ventured. "What precisely are you performing?" "Exercising my power as head executive," Marcus responded grimly. "The sole method to obtain the notice of an entire setup is to shut it down. Right now, every Mid-Atlantic journey across the nation is returning to its entrance for safety confirmation. That's over 300 aircraft and roughly 42,000 travelers." The scale of his reply left the sisters momentarily speechless. Their dad had essentially immobilized an entire carrier, one of the nation's largest transporters, in reply to the bias they had confronted. "Won't this price the carrier millions?" Zara queried, suddenly worried about the repercussions. "It will," Marcus verified. "Which is precisely why it's going to obtain everyone's notice. Occasionally the sole method to force alteration is to strike the bottom stripe hard enough that disregarding the issue becomes more costly than repairing it. More proclamations resounded through the station as the ripple effects of the halting spread. Connecting journeys were being missed. Travelers were growing increasingly irritated. The monetary harm was mounting by the minute. Mr. Jackson. A fresh tone uttered through the mobile. This is Harold Winters, Denver Facility Overseer. I've just been notified of the matter with your daughters. I desire to personally guarantee you that I had no awareness of these events and I'm appalled by what I'm perceiving. Spare it, Harold, Marcus responded coldly. I don't desire regrets. I desire action. I desire every worker who engaged with my daughters today in my virtual workspace in the next 10 minutes. All, registration, TSA, dining spot personnel, entrance staff, all of them. Sir, we don't possess power over TSA or the dining spot. Locate a method, Harold, because until I view all of those countenances on my display, every mid-Atlantic aircraft remains precisely where it is. While this dialogue persisted, a tiny group of airport oversight personnel neared the sisters. They donned the strained appearances of individuals confronting a crisis they didn't fully comprehend. Pardon me, the primary overseer uttered. A lady whose label named her as Patricia Reynolds, station activities head. We require to request you to shift to a less occupied zone. You're causing a disturbance. Nia elevated an brow. We're positioned quietly on a seat. How precisely are we causing a disturbance? Patricia's professional grin tightened. We've obtained accounts that your existence is linked to the current functional matters affecting Mid-Atlantic Airlines. We require to minimize traveler worry by removing visible origins of disturbance. You desire to remove us because we're African American youths who've been biased against, Zara translated bluntly, not because we're actually disturbing anyone. Patricia's grin vanished entirely. That's not what I uttered. This is about preserving order during a disturbance. Permit me render something very evident, Zara uttered, holding up her mobile where the contact with their dad was still active. This is Marcus Jackson, head executive of Mid-Atlantic Airlines. Would you desire to clarify to him why you're attempting to remove his daughters from communal view following they've been exposed to ethnic bias throughout your airport? The hue depleted from Patricia's countenance as the implication struck her. Mr. Jackson, the Marcus Jackson, she faltered. The very same, Marcus' tone verified from the amplifier. And I'd be very concerned to perceive why airport oversight is more worried with concealing the sufferers of bias than addressing the bias itself. Patricia took an involuntary pace backward. There must be some miscommunication. We had no notion. I mean, we were merely attempting to. I recommend, Marcus cut in, that you focus your endeavors on assembling the personnel I've requested rather than harassing my daughters further. With grumbled regrets, the oversight group withdrew, executing urgent contacts of their own as they dispersed. Throughout the station, the matter was intensifying from inconvenience to crisis. Bulletin groups had commenced to reach. Initially attracted by accounts of a major carrier halting, but increasingly curious about rumors of a bias incident triggering the shutdown. Travelers were capturing with their mobiles. Digital platforms was illuminating with speculation, and carrier personnel appeared increasingly alarmed as they attempted to manage the matter without comprehending its origin. Through it all, the sisters remained, positioned on their seat, observing as the consequences of their simple wish to journey while African American developed around them. What they couldn't view was that far past the airport, in business meeting chambers and management workspaces, an even greater tempest was brewing. In the opulent Manhattan workspaces of Mid-Atlantic Airlines' largest financier, Victor Harrington pounded his fist on his oak desk as his aide delivered the bulletin. He performed what? The aide flinched. Mr. Jackson has enacted Crisis Procedure Alpha. Sir, all Mid-Atlantic journeys have been halted for safety confirmation. The equity is already down 7% and dropping. Victor Harrington, billionaire financier and Mid-Atlantic Council participant, sensed his meticulously built world trembling beneath him. He'd opposed Marcus Jackson's naming as head executive from the commencement, arguing that the prior tech manager lacked the correct ethos fit for the carrier sector. What he'd signified, though he would never utter it straight, was that an African-American head executive didn't belong at the helm of a major carrier. He'd been outvoted by council participants desperate for Jackson's standing as a transformation expert, but he'd never accepted the choice. Now Jackson had provided him the ideal chance to rectify that error. "Obtain me Lawrence Pritchard at the Wall Street Gazette," Victor directed, already computing his following maneuvers. Then gathering in the other council participants, not Jackson, all else. Within minutes, Victor had twisted the account to the influential monetary journalist. Marcus Jackson was having a personal collapse, employing his power to halt an entire carrier over some perceived insult to his kin, potentially violating his trustee obligation to equity holders in the process. The tale would be online within the hour. The council contact proved mildly more challenging. "Victor, we don't possess all the details yet," cautioned council participant Eleanor Kim. "I've recognized Marcus for years. He's not impulsive. If he's taken this sort of action, there must be a grave cause. The cause is that his daughters couldn't obtain upgraded to premium," Victor mocked, intentionally mischaracterizing the matter. "Now he's throwing a fit that's costing equity holders millions by the minute. This is precisely why I opposed his naming. Too sentimental, too focused on his personal plan rather than enterprise concerns. We ought to at least perceive his side," suggested another council participant. "That's what the crisis council gathering is for," Victor responded smoothly, "which I've already planned for 3 hours from now. In the meantime, we require to contain the harm by concluding this absurd halting promptly." By the time the contact concluded, Victor had secured enough tentative backing to challenge Marcus' power at the crisis gathering. His following contact was to Stephanie Reynolds, Mid-Atlantic's deputy head of activities and his longtime partner within the enterprise. "Stephanie, I require you to manage something delicate. Jackson's daughters are still at Denver Global. I require them isolated and contained before they can cause any more harm. What precisely do you desire me to perform?" Stephanie queried, already reserving a private aircraft to Denver. "Obtain them away from communal view. Provide them the VIP handling, whatever it requires. But obtain them somewhere private where they can't converse with the press or upload on digital platforms. Frame it as safeguard from the disorder their dad has caused if you have to merely contain the matter." Stephanie grasped perfectly. Victor's contact to the Mid-Atlantic IT head Calvin Hughes was even more straight. "I require all those lasses have performed today obliterated. Guards footage, pass logs, all. Render it appear like a setup glitch if anyone queries." Calvin wavered. "Sir, that would involve altering official logs. It involves safeguarding this enterprise from a rogue head executive who's abusing his power," Victor rectified sharply. "The council will back you up. Merely perform it." By the time Victor Harrington disconnected his ultimate contact, a comprehensive counterattack was underway. The carrier's public relations group had commenced seeding tales about disruptive youths, causing a spectacle at Denver Global. Digital platforms profiles with links to the carrier were doubting the sisters' character and implying they had manipulated their dad into an overreaction. Bulletin outlets were obtaining press statements stressing the economic effect of the halting while dismissing the bias assertions as unconfirmed charges currently under inner review. Meanwhile, at Denver Global, Stephanie Reynolds had reached and was nearing the sisters with what appeared to be authentic worry. Zarania, she greeted them warmly as if they were old companions. "I'm Stephanie Reynolds, Deputy Head of Activities. I can't inform you how deeply disturbed I am by what I'm perceiving about your encounter today." Her grin appeared authentic, her body language open and sympathetic. Rearward her positioned 4 guards placed at a discreet distance but evidently part of her group. "Your dad requested me to personally guarantee your relaxation and safeguard while this matter is resolved," she proceeded. "We've readied our VIP area for you away from all this disorder. Private restrooms, relaxed positioning, refreshments, anything you require." Zara, still on the mobile with their dad, provided Stephanie a measured stare. "Dad, Stephanie Reynolds is here. She desires to take us to the VIP area. There was a halt before Marcus replied. His tone tinged with distrust. Position her on amplifier. When Stephanie perceived Marcus's tone, her grin faltered almost invisibly before she recovered. Marcus, I'm so glad we linked. I merely desire to guarantee you that I had no notion about any of this until I obtained your all-personnel message. I'm horrified. Truly horrified. And I'm here to personally ensure your daughters are cared for. That's quite considerate, Stephanie, Marcus responded, his inflection carefully neutral. But my directions to Zara and Nia were explicit. They are to remain in communal view in the main station where they can be viewed by other travelers and where any engagements with carrier or airport personnel will have observers. Stephanie's grin tightened. Certainly, I comprehend your worry, but truly with all the commotion, it might be safer and more relaxed for them in the area. There's quite a media existence gathering now, and I'm certain the lasses don't desire to be at the hub of that circus. Truly, Nia cut in. We're quite relaxed right here, but thank you for your worry. Stephanie's meticulously crafted facade commenced to crack. She inclined closer to the sisters, softening her tone so that only they and their dad on the mobile could perceive. Here cautiously. Your dad has formed a major crisis for this carrier. Thousands of travelers are stranded. Millions of dollars are being forfeited. His role is precarious right now to utter the least. The smart maneuver for your kin would be to quietly accept our hospitality and permit the grown-ups to resolve this matter expertly. The menace beneath her phrases was unmistakable. Is that a menace to my daughters, Stephanie? Marcus queried through the mobile, his tone dangerously quiet. Because it sounded remarkably like one, Stephanie straightened, grasping she had miscomputed. Not at all, Marcus. I'm merely worried about their well-being in this chaotic environment. Then you'll comprehend why they're remaining precisely where they are, adhering to my explicit directions, Marcus responded. And Stephanie, the next occasion you attempt to daunt my kids, clear out your workspace first. It will spare you a trip back to gather your items subsequently. The line went dead, leaving Stephanie gazing at the sisters with barely concealed fury. Without another term, she pivoted and proceeded away, the guard's detail adhering in her wake. Did Dad just dismiss her? Nia murmured to her sibling. I believe he just vowed to, Zara responded, observing Stephanie's withdrawing form. What they couldn't view was Stephanie promptly extracting her mobile to contact Victor Harrington reporting that direct daunt had failed and recommending they accelerate to more aggressive tactics. What they also couldn't grasp was that their digital platform's profiles were already under assault with fabricated uploads appearing from months prior to paint them as entitled troublemakers. Their academy logs were somehow leaked, though with false data about corrective matters inserted. Zara, foreseeing this maneuver, had already reached their academy's IT overseer, a lady who had guided her in programming. Together, they confirmed and published the sisters' actual academy logs, complete with their heads' utterance verifying the papers had been tampered with by outside forces. The conflict extended to bulletin coverage as well. Major outlets were executing competing tales, some focusing on the economic effect of the halting, others examining the bias assertions with increasing gravity. As more observers came forward, the tide of communal opinion was commencing to shift. As the sisters' systematic records of their encounter became harder to dismiss, Calvin Hughes made his choice. Instead of obliterating footage, he commenced securing it, positioning duplicates on protected servers where even head access couldn't erase them. He sent Marcus Jackson a direct note. I'm securing the proof, not ruining it. I'll bear witness if required. It was a profession-risking maneuver, but as he observed the fabricated assaults on two youthful lasses intensify, he couldn't be part of it any longer. By evening, what had commenced as an attempt to quiet and discredit the sisters had transformed into a digital uprising. Carrier workers from across the nation commenced sharing their own encounters with bias at Mid-Atlantic, both as workers and as observers to traveler mishandling. The label Mid-Atlantic bias was trending countrywide with thousands of tales emerging by the hour. Victor Harrington's counterattack had backfired spectacularly. Rather than isolating the sisters' encounter as an anomaly, his aggressive tactics had opened the floodgates to a much larger design of behavior that could no longer be contained. And in a business meeting chamber, the crisis gathering that he had summoned to remove Marcus Jackson was about to commence. The Mid-Atlantic Airlines Crisis Council gathering convened virtually with 14 grim-faced leaders appearing on displays. Victor Harrington wasted no duration in taking management of the account. "Colleagues, we confront an unprecedented crisis." He commenced, his tone grave. "Our head executive has halted our entire group over what appears to be a personal kin matter, potentially violating his trustee obligation to this enterprise and its equity holders. The equity has fallen 12% and persists to drop. We must act decisively." Several council participants assented in agreement, their worry evident. Victor proceeded, constructing his case methodically. "I maneuver that we temporarily relieve Marcus Jackson of his duties pending a full probe into his actions today. This isn't about ethnicity, as some are already implying in the media. This is about sound enterprise judgment." Before anyone could second the maneuver, Marcus Jackson appeared on display, his appearance serene but resolute. "Before you vote on Mr. Harrington's maneuver, I trust you ought to possess all the details." He pressed a button and his display was replaced by a sequence of papers and images. "What you're viewing is a preliminary account on bias grievances against Mid-Atlantic Airlines over the past 5 years. The council participants inclined closer to their displays, appearances shifting from annoyance to worry as they absorbed the data. "Bias grievances against our carrier are 340% higher than the sector average," Marcus proceeded, his tone firm. "Inner accounts recording this design were organizedly interred by prior oversight, many of whom were named by Mr. Harrington during his duration as head chairman." Victor's countenance flushed with fury. "This is a diversion from the matter at hand," he cut in. "Your sentimental overreaction to your daughter's encounter is costing this enterprise millions." "My daughter's encounter was not an isolated incident," Marcus countered. "It was a textbook instance of the biased ethos that has festered within this carrier for years. An ethos that signifies a massive judicial and monetary liability that has been concealed from this council and from equity holders." He switched to another display displaying pending judicial actions against the carrier. "These bias legal actions signify potential liabilities exceeding $800 million, none of which have been properly disclosed in our monetary utterances. That, Mr. Harrington, is a violation of trustee obligation." The space fell quiet as council participants processed this unveiling. Elena Kim was the initial to recover. "Marcus, are you uttering you were aware of these matters before today?" Marcus assented. "When the council engaged me 6 weeks prior to transform this carrier around, I commenced a quiet probe into enterprise ethos and methods. What I uncovered was disturbing. Organized bias, interred grievances, and a design of daunt against workers who uttered up." He halted, permitting his phrases sink in. "I was readying a comprehensive scheme to address these matters when my daughters encountered precisely the sort of handling I'd been recording. Their encounter wasn't the cause for my actions today. It was the spark. I employed Crisis Procedure Alpha because this enterprise has attained a crisis point that requires prompt intervention." Several council participants were now observing Victor Harrington with fresh distrust. Marcus pressed his benefit. "Furthermore, since enacting the procedure, I've uncovered attempts to ruin proof, daunt observers, and spread false data about my daughters online, all of which appear to trace back to Mr. Harrington's workspace." Victor's countenance contorted with rage. "This is absurd. You're issuing wild charges to conceal for your own incompetence. If you persist with these defamatory assertions, I'll employ every asset at my disposal to ruin you, Jackson. Your standing, your daughter's futures, all." The menace hung in the atmosphere for an instant before Marcus grinned icily. "Thank you for that, Victor. I ought to note that this entire gathering is being captured as per Enterprise Regulations Section 4.7, which requires records of all Crisis Council sessions." He halted. "Would you desire to rephrase your menace against my youthful daughters, or shall we permit it stand for the record?" Victor grasped too late that he had entered a snare. His meticulously built facade of reasonable worry had disintegrated, unveiling the uglier verity beneath. Council participants who had been leaning toward his role were now shifting uneasily, distancing themselves from his increasingly deranged demeanor. "Here's what's going to occur," Marcus proceeded, his tone level but commanding. "I'm enacting a comprehensive anti-bias program throughout Mid-Atlantic. Effective promptly. Every worker will undergo required training. A third party will probe all past grievances and our monetary disclosures will be amended to properly reflect our judicial liabilities." He gazed straight at Victor. "As for your maneuver to remove me, I greet the vote. But initially, permit me be evident. If I'm removed, my initial contact will be to the SEC regarding the deliberate concealment of material monetary liabilities from equity holders. My second will be to the Department of Justice Civil Entitlements section regarding the organized design of bias and subsequent conceal attempts." The meeting chamber fell quiet. Victor Harrington's maneuver died without a second. One by one, council participants voiced their backing for Marcus' scheme, eager to distance themselves from what was evidently becoming a judicial and public relations disaster. By the gathering's conclusion, even Victor had been compelled to abstain rather than stand solitary in opposition. As the virtual gathering concluded, Marcus stayed online with the council chair, Eleanor Kim. "That was masterfully managed," she admitted. "But the genuine challenge is merely commencing. Altering a business ethos this deeply rooted won't occur overnight." "I grasp," Marcus agreed. "That's why the following phase is so crucial. This can't merely be about penalty. It has to be about overhaul." Eleanor assented thoughtfully. "And your daughters? How are they holding up through all this?" Marcus' professional demeanor softened mildly. "They're remarkable, valiant, principled, and evidently quite skilled at digital safeguard." A hint of paternal pride crept into his tone. "They've been assembling proof all day, constructing a case that even our judicial group would be proud of." "They take after their dad," Ella Lehner observed. "What occurs now?" "Now," Marcus uttered, his resolve evident. "We bring all into the illumination. No more conceal-ups, no more denial. It's time for a communal reckoning." The Mid-Atlantic Airlines tale detonated across national bulletin the following dawn. What had commenced as coverage of an unusual carrier halting had transformed into a major tale about business bias following the sisters, with their dad's blessing, published a detailed account of their encounter alongside the proof they'd gathered. Their upload, simply titled, "What Occurred to Us at Mid-Atlantic Airlines," laid out each incident chronologically, backed by observer utterances, captures, timestamps, and records. It was measured in tone, factual rather than charging, and devastatingly effective because of that restraint. Within hours, Fogger Mid-Atlantic bias was the top trending topic countrywide. Other sufferers of bias by the carrier commenced sharing their tales, forming an avalanche of testimony that could no longer be dismissed as isolated incidents. Prior workers joined in, describing a toxic ethos where reporting bias was profession suicide. Victor Harrington, refusing to accept vanquish, launched his menaced media attack. Bulletin outlets friendly to his enterprise concerns commenced doubting Marcus' skill, implying he had overreacted to a minor patron assistance matter because of personal sentimental involvement. Conservative analysts hinted that the sisters had provoked the incidents, acting in ways that justified the personnel's reactions. The account battle might have gained traction if not for Marcus' following maneuver. With the sisters' agreement, he released the capture of Victor Harrington's meeting chamber menaces against his daughters. The audio segment spread virally with millions perceiving Harrington's rage-filled tone promising to ruin two youthful lasses for uttering out against bias. The communal reaction was prompt and overwhelming. Mid-Atlantic equity, already harmed by the halting, plummeted further. Major equity holders commenced publicly distancing themselves from Harrington, with several institutional financiers calling for his removal from the council. His enterprise, standing constructed over decades, commenced to disintegrate in real time. Meanwhile, the workers who had biased against the sisters uncovered themselves in an uneasy spotlight. Richard Whitman, the entrance clerk, provided a defensive dialogue to a local Denver channel that only worsened his role. "I was merely adhering to processes," he persisted, though he could not specify which processes required him to proclaim a false guards alert or expose the sisters to extra scrutiny. Trevor Reynolds, the registration clerk, was named in guards footage intentionally altering the sisters' passes from premium to coach. When confronted by journalists outside his residence, his reply, "Specific folks don't grasp how to act." In premium was captured on lens, verifying rather than refuting the charges of bias. The TSA launched an inner probe into Vanessa Miller's conduct following multiple observers came forward describing her design of targeting minority travelers for intrusive examinations. Dining spot overseer Keith Dawson was positioned on leave following Elena Rodriguez supplied captures of his bigoted remarks about patrons. By midday, the tale had reached the white residence with the press aide verifying that the Department of Transportation would be examining Mid-Atlantic's compliance with anti-bias laws. Several participants of Congress summoned for hearings on bias in the carrier sector more broadly. Marcus Jackson at last addressed the communal via a real-time footage utterance from Mid-Atlantic headquarters. With the sisters positioned beside him, he outlined a comprehensive scheme to address bias within the carrier. "What occurred to my daughters was not an isolated incident," he uttered resolutely. "It was a symptom of a systemic issue that has gone unrest for far too long. Today, that alters." He proclaimed a sequence of prompt actions. Required anti-bias training for all personnel. Transparent reporting of all bias grievances, establishment of a traveler bill of entitlements, and formation of an independent review council with real power to probe grievances and recommend corrective actions. Perhaps most astonishingly, he proclaimed that the workers straight implicated in biasing against his daughters would not be summarily dismissed. Termination might sense satisfying in the instant, he clarified, but it doesn't resolve the underlying issue. Instead, these workers will participate in forming and enacting our fresh anti-bias training program with their compensations during this interval donated to civil entitlements entities. True alteration requires education and responsibility, not merely penalty. The reaction to Marcus' approach was mixed. Some praised his focus on systemic alteration rather than individual scapegoating, while others sensed the workers deserved prompt termination. The sisters themselves backed their dad's choice with Nia clarifying in a brief utterance, "This isn't about ruining individual professions. It's about altering a setup that encourages and rewards bias." Victor Harrington executed one final authority maneuver, summoning in favors from carrier partners and major business patrons to pressure Mid-Atlantic. Several partner carriers menaced to conclude code share pacts. Business journey profiles worth millions warned they might take their enterprise elsewhere if Marcus stayed in management. The message was evident. The sector would close ranks against an outsider who menaced to unveil and alter their methods. Marcus' reply was equally evident. He released a detailed account documenting bias across the carrier sector with data implying Mid-Atlantic's issues, while severe, were not unique. "This is larger than one carrier," he uttered. "This is a sector-wide failure that requires sector-wide reform. Enterprises can either lead that alteration or be dragged into it by regulation and litigation. The choice is theirs." By evening, the communal account had shifted definitively. What Harrington had attempted to frame as a leader's sentimental overreaction was now widely comprehended as a required intervention against entrenched bias. The sisters, initially portrayed by some as entitled youths causing trouble, were increasingly viewed as principled young females who had unveiled an ugly verity that could no longer be disregarded. As darkness descended, Victor Harrington positioned solitary in his workspace, observing his meticulously built world collapse around him. His mobile, once constantly buzzing with contacts from influential partners, had fallen quiet. In meeting chambers across the nation, leaders were distancing themselves, erasing his contact data, declining his contacts. The message was evident. Victor Harrington had become toxic, a liability rather than an asset. His authority, once seemingly unassailable, had vanished in a single day. And it had all commenced because two youthful lasses had simply desired to board a plane for which they possessed authentic passes. 6 months subsequently, Zara and Nia Jackson positioned at Mid-Atlantic Airlines Entrance 32 at Denver Global Airport, the very identical entrance where they had been denied boarding half a year prior. This occasion, the atmosphere couldn't have been more distinct. The entrance clerk, a young South Asian lady named Priya Sharma, verified their boarding passes with a warm grin. "Good midday, ladies. Boston today." She handed back their identifications without excessive scrutiny, handling them with the identical casual productivity she displayed every traveler. The sisters shared stares. This ordinary engagement, unremarkable to most commuters, signified a profound alteration from their prior encounter. They boarded the aircraft without incident, settling into their premium places as other travelers filed past. The overhaul of Mid-Atlantic Airlines over the preceding months had been remarkable, if not without challenges. The day following their encounter had gone communal. Marcus Jackson had made good on his vow not to merely dismiss the workers implicated. Instead, he had formed what became known as the Responsibility Council, a very group tasked with redesigning the carrier's approach to patron assistance and anti-bias. Richard Whitman, Trevor Reynolds, Gregory Walsh, and Diane Blackett had all initially opposed participation, viewing it as a degrading penalty. But Marcus had provided them a straightforward choice. Participate genuinely in forming alteration or confront termination and potential judicial action. Unwillingly, they had joined the council alongside civil entitlements experts, patron assistance specialists, and prior sufferers of bias. The early council gatherings had been tense with the workers defensive and the bias sufferers furious. Progress had been slow and painful. But over time, something unforeseen had emerged. Authentic overhaul. Compelled to heed to tale. Following tale of biased handling to confront the harm their actions had caused, the workers had commenced to recognize designs in their own behavior they had previously rationalized away. Diane Blackett had encountered perhaps the most profound alteration. As an African American lady who had adapted to a biased setup by enforcing its guidelines against her own society, she had carried perhaps the heaviest burden of cognitive dissonance. Her breakthrough had arrived during a particularly difficult council session. When a young African American flight server had described being informed by a manager to soften her natural hairdo because it made some travelers uneasy, "I uttered those exact phrases to a new engaged last year," Diane had admitted, her tone breaking. "I informed myself I was aiding her succeed in the actual world, but I was merely perpetuating the identical setup that I had to battle against." Her honest acknowledgement had marked a turning point for the council's efforts. Now, 6 months subsequently, Mid-Atlantic had enacted the most comprehensive anti-bias program in the sector. Every worker underwent required training that went past superficial variety exercises to address unconscious bias and observer intervention. A nameless reporting setup permitted travelers and workers to flag concerning engagements without dread of revenge. Most crucially, these accounts were taken gravely with real consequences for verified bias. The carrier had also made structural alterations. Employment and elevation methods were redesigned to reduce bias. Patron satisfaction metrics were adjusted to guarantee they didn't penalize workers for enforcing guidelines equally across all traveler demographics. And perhaps most significantly, upper oversight compensation was now partially linked to bias metrics, forming financial incentives for leaders to take the matter gravely. Financial analysts had initially forecasted disaster, with some predicting that Mid-Atlantic would forfeit up to 20% of its market worth as it diverted assets to societal equity rather than functional productivity. Victor Harrington, who had been compelled to depart from the council following equity holder pressure, had been particularly vocal in predicting the carrier's downfall. But something unforeseen had occurred instead. Following an initial period of adjustment, Mid-Atlantic's patron satisfaction scores had commenced to rise across all demographic groups. Worker retention improved as personnel reported sensing more valued and less conflicted about their work environment. The anticipated mass exodus of business patrons never materialized. In reality, several major entities specifically switched their journey packs to Mid-Atlantic, citing its moral management as aligning with their own business values. The sisters' Boston journey was nearing its ultimate descent when the pilot's tone came over the communicator. "Ladies and gentlemen, will be landing at Boston Logan Global in about 15 minutes. Current climate is sunny and 48 degrees. On behalf of myself and Initial Officer Rodriguez, as well as our cabin group, led by Diane Blackett, thank you for journeying with us today." Nia stared up in astonishment at the familiar title. Moments subsequently, Diane herself appeared from the forward compartment, executing a ultimate verification before landing. She halted beside the sisters' places. "Zorania," she uttered quietly. "I desired to thank you personally. I grasp this is your initial journey with us since all occurred. What you performed altered this carrier, altered all of us. It couldn't have been easy to stand your ground that day." The sisters hadn't anticipated this. They had selected this journey for their school visits deliberately, confronting the scene of their prior degradation as a form of closure. But they hadn't foreseen such a direct acknowledgement. "It wasn't easy," Zara agreed. "But required matters rarely are." Diane assented. "For what it's valued, I'm regretful for my part in it. I informed myself I was aiding you by instructing you to accept bias rather than battle it. I was incorrect and you displayed me that." Following Diane returned to her position, Nia pivoted to her sibling. "Did you ever picture when we were positioned in this station 6 months prior that this would be the outcome?" Zara wagged her head. "I was merely hoping to reach Boston and tour some schools. I never anticipated to assist transform an entire carrier or commence a sector-wide reckoning," Nia added. Adhering to Mid-Atlantic's lead, several other major transporters had enacted their own anti-bias initiatives, though none is comprehensive. The Department of Transportation had launched formal probes into biased methods across the sector. Congressional hearings had positioned carrier leaders on the hot seat, compelling communal commitments to alter. As the aircraft contacted down smoothly on Boston's runway, Zara pondered about the journey that had brought them here. The bias they had confronted had been authentic and painful. The conflict afterward had been fatiguing, but the outcome had exceeded anything they could have pictured. Their dad had informed them something during the darkest days of the communal controversy that now seemed prophetic. Overhaul arrives through flame. The setups that require altering most will battle hardest against that alteration. But if you stand resolute in your verity, even when it's difficult, even when it's costly, you form the possibility for something superior to emerge from the remnants. As they gathered their items and readied to disembark, Zara caught sight of a young African-American lass, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, positioned with her kin in coach. The kid was gazing around the compartment with enthusiasm rather than worry, encountering air journey as the quest it ought to be, rather than a gauntlet of potential degradation. That kid would never grasp what had occurred at entrance 326 months prior. She would never grasp the battles fought and won before she ever set foot on a plane. But she would benefit from them nevertheless. Shifting through the world with one less hindrance, one less origin of dread. And in that instant, Zara grasped that all they had endured had been valued it. The sisters stepped off the aircraft into their future. Eternally altered by their past, but not defined by it. Rearward them, a transformed carrier persisted its own journey of evolution. And somewhere in business meeting chambers across America, leaders were discovering a potent moral. Bias wasn't merely ethically incorrect. It was bad enterprise. The world was altering with or without them. Those who adapted would flourish. Those who opposed would be left rearward. Relics of a past that fewer and fewer folks were ready to accept. As Marcus Jackson had informed the Ultimate Crisis Council gathering 6 months prior, this isn't about politics or ideology. This is about handling folks with basic human honor. Any enterprise that can't grasp that essential principle doesn't deserve to survive in the 21st century. Mid-Atlantic Airlines had grasped that principle painfully but thoroughly. And in performing so, it had secured not merely its moral standing, but its economic future. The overhaul through flame was complete, and it had all commenced because 2 youthful lasses had refused to accept being obscure. This tale of Zara and Nia Jackson's journey through bias and overhaul provides potent morals that resonate past their individual encounter. Initial, it demonstrates that systemic bias often remains obscure until straight challenged. What appeared as isolated incidents to casual observers was unveiled as part of a pervasive design affecting countless others. Second, the sisters display us the significance of records and proof in battling bias. Their methodical capturing of titles, incidents, and collecting observer utterances proved crucial in establishing the verity against attempts to discredit them. In today's digital age, proof is a potent weapon against manipulation and denial. Third, this tale illustrates how alteration requires both management and pressure from below. Marcus Jackson's role provided him the authority to force institutional alteration, but it was his daughter's encounter and valor that sparked his action. True overhaul often commences with those who possess the least authority but the most at stake. Perhaps most crucially, the tale challenges the false division between ethics and economics. The conventional wisdom that addressing bias hurts enterprise proved not merely incorrect but backwards. Mid-Atlantic became stronger, more profitable, and more respected precisely because it confronted its biases rather than concealing them. At last, we discovered that meaningful alteration isn't about penalizing persons but transforming setups. By focusing on education, responsibility, and structural reform rather than simple termination, Mid-Atlantic formed sustainable alteration that rippled throughout a sector. These morals remind us that battling bias isn't merely ethically required. It's essential for forming institutions that truly serve all with honor and respect. What instance in your existence have you observed bias and wished you could make a difference? Have you ever been in a situation where uttering up seemed unfeasible but required? Comment below with your encounters or thoughts on how we can all contribute to forming more equitable setups in our daily existences. If this tale resonated with you, please press that thumbs up button to aid others locate it and join for more potent accounts that explore crucial societal matters. Share this video with one who requires to comprehend that individual valor can spark systemic alteration. Thank you for heeding to Zara and Nia's journey. Recall, overhaul commences with those valiant enough to stand in their verity, even when it's difficult. May we all locate that valor when it matters.